Rather than moving on to our next config file, I think that it would be kind of nice to take these two config files we just put together and load them up into Kubernetes, just to make sure that everything that we've done so far is on the level and that we don't have any typos or anything like that in there. Now, I do want to remind you that when we load up both these config files through the kubectl apply command, we're not going to be able to very easily test out the multi-client deployment, or the client deployment right here, just because the service that is governing access to it is not allowing outside traffic. So we will not be able to test this out inside of our browser just yet, but we can at least start up the deployment and look at it in kubectl and say, okay, our pods are actually running. So let's get to it. We're going to load up both these config files right here. Now, the first thing I want to do is to make sure that we delete our old deployment, the previous deployment that we had put together as we were first learning a lot of this stuff. So to delete the old deployment, I'm going to list it out with kubectl get deployments, and then I will delete it with kubectl delete client deployment, or excuse me, delete deployment client deployment. There we go. Again, we list out delete, the type of object we want to delete, and then the name of the thing that we want to delete. So I'll run that. Now I can do a kubectl get deployments, and no resources are found. Now don't forget, we had also created a service as well. It was a node port that was providing access to the set of pods that were created by that deployment. So to get a list of all the services we have created, I'll do kubectl get services. And now we can very easily see that, yes, there is in fact the client node port there. So we can delete this thing in a very similar fashion. I'll do kubectl delete service client node port, like so. Oops, typo there. There we go. So now if I do another get services, I'm only going to see the original Kubernetes service. And again, we're not touching that. That's something internal to Kubernetes, and we don't need to mess around with it at all. All right, so now we're ready to apply those two config files. Now, we could use the same technique that we had previously used for loading up config files, where we did something like kubectl apply -f. And then remember, we're currently inside the complex folder, but all of our config files are inside of K8s. So we could do something like K8s, and then what was the first one called? Client deployment. But there's actually a little shortcut that we can use anytime that we want to apply a group of configuration files. So rather than spelling out the entire path right here, I'm going to instead confirm that the K8s directory is right there, and then I can apply every file inside there with apply -f, and I'm just going to provide the K8s directory. When I do this, kubectl is going to look into that folder. It's going to find every config file in there, and it's going to apply all of them at the same time. So if I run that, I'm going to see that we have both IP service created, and in the case of the deployment file, it looks like I probably made a little typo at some point in time. Let's check that out really quickly. See inside there, I said metadata label. Oops, it should be labels, plural, like so. So I'm just going to make that very quick change. And then if I try applying that thing again, I get both of them created. Well, at least the first one was unchanged, but the second one was created. So now we can do a kubectl get deployments, and we'll see that we have 3 pods created tied to our client deployment. And of course, if we do a get pods, we'll see all 3 of those different pods running. Finally, we can do a kubectl get services, and we'll see that we have the cluster IP service created for our client as well. Cool. So we're going to make use of this kubectl apply on an entire directory quite a bit, since you and I have like 11 different configuration files at least to manage throughout this application. All right, so let's take a quick pause right here, and we'll continue in the next section.